I think we ought to go ahead and start, Don.
I think so, Michael.
All right.
It's a couple minutes past 6:30.
Excellent. Welcome to tonight's Old Orchard Beach Intersection Safety and Mobility Assessment public meeting. I'm the Assistant Planner, Michael Foster. The study's in partnership with Maine DOT. We selected Gorrill-Palmer as the engineering firm to conduct this study, and they're hosting tonight's meeting. The study area is commonly referred to as the halfway intersection, where Interstate 95 connects to Route 5, which is Ocean Park Road, and that meets Saco Avenue, Temple Avenue, Old Salt Road, and Old Orchard Road. Gorrill-Palmer completed a study of this intersection in 2005, but since then, traffic engineering recommendations have changed, and updated data is needed for them to be able to evaluate and make recommendations. And this intersection was chosen for this study due to it being identified as a high crash location, the summer traffic congestion, and resident concerns, including excessive speeds, confusing intersection layout, to name a couple things. A traffic calming experiment was done during the summer of 2019. And this experimented with narrowing travel lanes, creating pedestrian refuge islands, and expanding the existing traffic islands. And a measurable reduction of travel speeds was found. And along with relocating the entrance to Old Salt Road, these changes were made to be more permanent. And this resulted in the town's request to Maine DOT for a planning study to consider more substantive changes to improve the intersection mobility and safety for all modes of transportation. And so we have Gorrill-Palmer helping us with this study, and I'll turn it over to Don Ettinger tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to see if I can get a PowerPoint loaded here. And Randy, I assume, so we are recording this, Randy, correct?
Correct.
And you will mute, ideally we'd have people muted while we do the presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers after the presentation. Let's see if I can share my screen. Let's see how successful we are. Share. And this. And all right, so if we're successful, you guys should be looking at a PowerPoint with a photo on the right, some text on the left. Does that look correct? Excellent. Okay. So we'll jump into it. Introductions. I think Michael did a good job of doing an intro. He actually covered some of my slides today. I probably have 15 to 20 minutes worth of slides and presentations talking about the history of this intersection. And in terms of introductions, we have a pretty robust study team that's working on this project. Some are present tonight. From the consultant team, which is Gorrill-Palmer, it's myself, Don Ettinger. I'm a principal in the firm, and we'll be heavily involved in the process. I guess 2 steps back, this is the initial public meeting. We're just really getting started with this project. We really don't have recommendations tonight. We have some thoughts and ideas of alternatives we'd like to consider, but we really haven't done the work yet. So tonight's meeting is kind of an intro to the study with the goal of getting some feedback from the local citizens as to, you know, what they're observing, what their concerns might be. From Gorrill-Palmer is Randy Dutton. Randy is our lead traffic engineer, will be heavily involved in this assignment. And we have Jared Winchenbach as well. Jared is, I see my connection's unstable. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Jared is a lead designer for our group. Also with us tonight is Jim Tassi. Jim Tassi will be kind of an expert advisor as it relates to bike and pedestrian accommodations. This project will not only focus on vehicles, but pedestrian and bicycle mobility. And Jim's other job is think it's the assistant director of the Bike Coalition of Maine. So Jim is involved statewide on bike initiatives and pedestrian initiatives. So we're glad to have him on the team. In terms of town officials, Mike Foster, he introduced himself on the outset. Larry Mead, I think, is on the call tonight. He's the town manager. We have the town planner, Jeff Hindenleiter, who we've been working with. I'm not sure if he's present tonight. But we've also been working with police and fire, police chief and fire chief Dana Kelly, Fred Lamontagne. And then representing DOT, this is a joint study, planning study, and Marty Rooney is present tonight. Daryl Bells might be on the line. I didn't see his name, but they're both in the planning group, and this is funded jointly by the state and the town. It is a town initiative. It's the town that requested this study, and the town is leading the effort, but the state of Maine is a partner in it. All right, tonight's meeting format, we'd like to do the presentation, which I've already started. We are recording this, so ideally it would be posted on the town's website after tonight, so others can view it. So if you have neighbors that can't attend tonight, this video should be on the website for them to watch for the next few weeks. We're soliciting town comments or public comments tonight, but you also can do write-in comments over the next several weeks, either through the website or through the email, Michael Foster's email, which is provided on this page here. As Michael had mentioned, the location of this project is the halfway intersection. It's at the tail end. Slide this around. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. It's where the red star is on this graphic. It's basically the tail end of I call it the 195 interstate spur from the turnpike as it drops in heading towards Old Orchard. It's that main intersection with Saco Ave, Temple Ave, and Old Orchard Road. More specifically, if you zoom into the area on this aerial, it's 5 legs, as Michael had mentioned. Let me see if I can get my highlighter working, my laser pointer. So this side here is heading towards that interstate spur that takes you to the turnpike. The ocean is over on this side. North is in the up direction. So we have Ocean Park Road here. We have Old Orchard Road here, Old Salt Road, Temple Ave, and Saco Ave. So it's a conglomerate of 5 pretty substantial roads, all tying into one intersection that is currently unsignalized and is confusing at best to navigate. A little bit of the study history, and Jim, I've tagged Jim Tassi to comment a bit. Michael had mentioned that there's been some traffic calming that's occurred at this intersection as recent as last year. Maine DOT came in and did a pavement overlay project, and I know Jim Tassi had an initiative, a pedestrian safety and bicycle safety initiative at this location. And I think they were able to partner with DOT and incorporate some of those improvements when they did the overlay job last year. So with that said, Jim, is there anything else you would like to add to the work you were a part of in 2019?
Sure, thanks. Thanks for everyone for showing up tonight. And at this location last year, we put down a bunch of delineators to enlarge the traffic islands and try to constrict some of the travel lanes and define some of the channels a little bit better. We made modest reductions in speed. I think greater reductions would have been possible with more, constriction of the travel lanes, but there were circumstances that prevented us from doing that. While we were, setting up the demonstration project, we did have extended conversations about strategies to improve pedestrian access pretty immediately as part of that overlay project. And I think Don's got a slide coming up a little bit later that talks about some of those improvements. So it was a good demonstration project to show that improvements could be made relatively inexpensively using delineators. I think that more robust and permanent changes are definitely needed. The best outcome is that the DOT made significant improvements to the pedestrian access as part of the overlay. The changes grew out of the demonstration project. So that was the plus there. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, so let's go back into the Wayback Machine and talk about a previous study that was done for this intersection 15 years ago. So Gorrill-Palmer was involved with the town on a planning study of what to do at this intersection. We completed a study, as you can see here. The outcomes of that study were, I think there were 4 or 5 alternatives that were developed. I'm going to quickly show you those kind of as reference on the next few slides. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them, but so this is our intersection proper right here, currently unsignalized. This alternative that was developed basically made it into a 4-way signalized intersection. So that was an option considered back 15 years ago. The second option that was considered was a 3-way signalized intersection with Ocean Park Road, Saco Ave, Old Orchard Road. And what they did on Old Salt Road and Temple Ave is they terminated it from the intersection, and the idea being is that they wanted to use a local road up here for the connection onto Saco Ave. So the next slide will show that local road connection. I think it was Godwin or Goodwin Ave. This road right here, which is an existing road, they kind of formalized that and had the traffic come down there with a signalized intersection on Saco Ave. So that was an alternative that was on the table. The third alternative was a roundabout. So this is in part a partial multi-lane roundabout, but it's a roundabout, and it would accommodate 5 legs of the intersection, 4 legs of the intersection. The 5th leg, Old Salt Road, was realigned and tied into Temple Ave. This was actually done last year as part of the DOT work, the intersection reconfiguration and the overlay work. So that Old Salt Road realignment onto Temple has already been completed. Another alternative that was considered was 2 3-way intersections, and they were signalized in close proximity to each other. So it still allowed Old Orchard Road to connect on, as well as Temple Ave to connect to the main road. And then this was the last alternative they considered. I guess it's called the directional channelization intersection. It's a little bit confusing, if I'm being honest, and it's probably not one that we would recommend moving forward. So it's good for us to see what was proposed 15 years ago. What I can tell you is that we have new personnel in-house, and there are new design standards, there's new industry standards, there's renewed focus on different components of intersection design. So while these are very handy to have as reference, we're going to kind of review this intersection with new thoughts and new ideas. We may come up with similar conclusions, but we really want to make sure we're doing a fresh look at the study. Now is probably a good time to talk a bit about the purpose and need for the study. Whenever we embark on this type of study, it's really important that we document what the purpose and need is, because as we develop alternatives, we want to kind of score those alternatives to the purpose and need of the study, so we can find out which ones might rank the best in achieving the purpose and need of the project. So this slide here talks a bit about the purpose, and the purpose really is an intersection study of the intersection we mentioned to identify a range of implementable alternatives to improve the intersection mobility and safety. And that mobility and safety is for all modes of transportation, not just vehicles, but bikes and pedestrians. And it is for the current condition and in the future. So when we analyze this, we'll probably do an assessment of present day traffic volume assessment, as well as maybe a 20-year projection. In addition to the purpose, there are needs assessments. So what's needed at this location and what is needed as part of this study? Well, safety. Michael had mentioned that this intersection is a high crash location, and it certainly is. In the most recent 3-year period, it had 20 accidents or 20 crashes and a critical rate factor of 2.78. By perspective, for DOT to classify an intersection as a high crash location, it needs to have 8 or more accidents and a critical rate factor of greater than 1 over a 3-year period. So this far exceeds those minimum criteria. There are safety concerns, and I have a slide that kind of shows some accident patterns later in the presentation. Excessive speeds, either through the prior studies, field observations, or comments received, we believe that speed is an issue at this intersection, particularly for some of the movements. A coming off the interstate and heading down Temple Ave. It's a pretty straight shot. Cars seem to navigate through the intersection at higher than acceptable speeds for that movement. So one of the more important ones is confusing geometry. As you know, you drive through this, you don't see many intersections like this in the state of Maine. The intersection geometry is unconventional, it's unusual. It's confusing to drivers who are not familiar with the area. So as you guys know, Old Orchard Beach is a major tourist destination. So when you have the tourists come through, they're unfamiliar with this area. They don't know how to navigate it. They hesitate coming into the intersection. They may choose a wrong lane. It ends up reducing mobility, creates unsafe situations. And so it's not a good situation. We really would like to, when we're done, have the intersection be something that people are accustomed to navigating. So it's a little challenging with 5 legs, but I do think we can come up with an option that can resolve the confusing geometry. In addition, other needs assessment, access management. We want to make sure that the project is adhering to the access management standards that this DOT has for their roadways. We're aware that there are businesses that exist to the south, west, and east of the intersection, and there's residential neighborhoods to the north. We'll talk a bit about the residential neighborhoods to the north in a future slide. But if we don't have good access management, we're introducing other conflict points into this intersection, which basically reduces our safety and our mobility. Wayfinding, which is a fancy name for signage. What we've heard and what we've seen is there's not sufficient signage approaching the intersection, and tourists have a hard time navigating it if they're not familiar with the area. So we want to make sure we provide better approach signing to this intersection to make it easier for all users to navigate it. And mobility currently is compromised, particularly during the summer months, for all the reasons we've stated above. So wrapping up the purpose and need statement, there are going to be some performance measures that we need to kind of consider as we evaluate the alternatives. Some of the measures relating to transportation will be vehicle level of service. We'll be doing full traffic analysis and modeling and determining levels of service for different alternatives. We'll be assessing safety for not only the vehicles, but for pedestrians and bicyclists. That's in part why we have Jim Tassi in our group to really help us and guide us through that process. Wayfinding and signage, accommodating emergency vehicles. That's a topic that we've been discussing with fire and rescue already, and we'll continue through as we develop the alternatives. And figuring out a way to better control speeds will be important. In terms of other performance metrics or measures, land use, as it relates to whatever alternative we develop, does it have right-of-way impacts? Does it require acquiring land to build the project? Does it have impacts to abutters? Are we meeting our access management standards? And does it accommodate future land use development? As we mentioned, whatever gets designed and built here will be here for a long time. We want to make sure it fits the future vision of the town, and really want this to kind of be a gateway into the community. Environmental measures, impacts to historic properties or archaeological resources will be looked at. Wetlands or environmental sensitive areas will be considered. Impacts to conservation or public lands. Impacts to rare, threatened, or endangered species, be it plants or animals. Those are all factors that will be part of the evaluation process. And cost and funding. How much will each of the alternatives cost? How does that cost compare to the benefits of each of those alternatives? And constructability. How easy is it to construct? Could it be constructed in phases if funding is limited? So with that said, a few extra slides to kind of follow up on what I just presented. So this slide here is existing conditions. It's our high crash location. So this demonstrates crash patterns. As you'll note down towards the bottom here, this is the crash patterns over a 3-year period from 2017 through 19. We had 20 accidents, and it kind of shows where the accidents occurred at the intersection and what was the cause of the accident. So each one of these will say failure to yield, driver inattention, following too close, improper turns. So you can kind of see the movements that are resulting in the accidents. So that's helpful to us to understand. As we develop alternatives, we'll try to develop them in a manner that maybe eliminates these types of conflicts. All right, so this now is a slide of what we would consider was constructed last year. So you can kind of see it shows Old Salt Road was realigned, and when they overlaid the road, they did some sidewalk improvements, they did some access management along some of these adjacent properties, and they did quite a bit of pedestrian improvements. This is what we would consider an as-built or the result of the work that was done last year. Jim, anything else to add to this slide, or are you good with it?
I'm all set. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. All right, stay on board, Jim, because this next one is yours. So Jim pulled this together for us this morning, and I'm just going to let him talk about it a bit. I think it's a very interesting slide.
So this is an image from the Strava heat map. Strava is an application that bicycle riders and runners and some walkers use to kind of track their activity. And what Strava has been discovering is that all this information about where people are walking, biking, and running has some value for planning purposes. And what this image shows you is that quite a lot of people, this is a bicycle slide in particular, but a lot of bicycle riders go through this intersection. The running, walking slide looks very similar. Most of the trips are recreational and leisure oriented, and most of the trips appear to be on the weekends. So kind of reinforcing that they're kind of recreational in nature. But I thought it was important to get this slide out there to show that this gets a lot of multimodal traffic, a lot of people walking and biking through here. And I'm pleased that GP is going to be working on making sure that that mode is addressed as well.
Yep, perfect. Thank you, Jim. All right, continuing along. So this is, the work was done last year. One thing that we have done is we've gone out to the intersection and taken a look at a few things and tried to identify are there still deficiencies, whether they're ADA compliance deficiencies or access management. In the case here, the blue triangles kind of represent areas where access management could be improved upon. The green circles represent ADA sidewalk ramps that are ADA compliant. So they were reconstructed probably last year with the DOT project. But we do have a few red circles here. Those are what we'd consider those to be non-compliant ADA ramps. So we'll, as we progress and develop some alternatives, those are areas that we'll focus on making improvements. And then this is an interesting slide. So while we haven't developed any alternatives per se, this is the farthest that we've taken the study to date. We wanted to kind of show this to the group today to get some initial feedback. I think we feel pretty comfortable as a study team that 2 of these options we want to carry forward through the alternatives analysis. We're scoped to do 4. So we've developed 4 here, but you know, depending on tonight's input and input from the public over the next week or 2, you know, we do have the ability to kind of tweak option or alternative 3 and 4. So alternative 1 is the roundabout. That 2005 study that was done that I mentioned earlier, the recommendations of that study was to proceed forward with the roundabout option. So we want to keep that one on the table through this process. It may rise to the top through this study, but it may not. And so that's part of the fun of going through this process. But we do feel the roundabout option should be an option that we consider in this study. And that is the one over here on the left. The next option, and these are just very rough sketches, talking with Jim Tassi, he's like, well, you're not accommodating bikes yet. And he's right. These are just very rough sketches. We haven't put any engineering behind these, but they would accommodate bikes when we develop them, the concepts. So just please note they're rough sketches. This option is a 4-way signal. So currently it's unsignalized. We feel we could come up with an option that could signalize the intersection, have a 4-way intersection, maybe much more conventional and probably a little easier to navigate and less confusing. Options 1 and 2, we feel pretty firm that we'd like to carry those 4 in the study. Options 3 and 4 are kind of on the table for discussion. Option 3, which is over here in the bottom left, is basically a 3-way intersection. So the idea being that the main road, Saco Ave, would continue. We would signalize it with Temple Ave. And then you take Old Orchard Road and tie it into Temple prior to getting to the intersection. So we're creating a 3-way signalized intersection with Temple. And then option 4 is similar but different with some different consequences. So option 4 is we still create a 3-way intersection with Saco Ave, but it's with Old Orchard Road instead. Temple Ave, we close. If we're closing Temple, what do we do with Temple? Temple would have to find a different route to get to Saco Ave, whether it's Goodwin Ave or another road or maybe a brand new connector road. So those were kind of the 4 options we had put on the table in our initial kickoff meeting. Again, I think options 3 and 4, we'd be real interested in getting some feedback from the public tonight on those. So we'll come back to this slide. I had mentioned that with any of these alternatives, we're going to need to take a look at the neighborhoods to the north. And the reason why I state that is both Dewey Ave and Olympia Ave, this is our intersection right here. We have Dewey Ave to the north and Olympia Ave to the north. They tie in to Saco Ave very close to the intersection. With the options that were developed back in 2005, and I think with the options we're going to be looking at, they're so close to the intersection that they may have restricted movements, meaning that there may be some raised islands that restrict left turn movements into these 2 roads or left turn movements out. And so under that scenario, we may find that these 2 local roads may have restricted movements to be right in and right out only. And if that's the case, we'll need to work with the town to. We'll need to work with the town to see if there's maybe some backstreet connectivity that could be considered. As you look at this graphic, we have Oak Street here. You know, is there the possibility of extending Oak Street to Jeanette Ave and maybe extending Dewey Ave back to that connection? We don't know. We haven't spent any time with it aside from just looking at it on an aerial. But if we are restricting movements down here, that might be something that comes out of the study, as this needs to be investigated a little further to provide better connectivity to allow people to get full access to this neighborhood. So food for thought. Again, welcome any comment in the Q&A session. All right, so we're wrapping up the presentation. So this slide here is more of a summary of the work we've done to date. It's not a ton of work, but there have been some activities. So we did have an internal study team kickoff meeting in August. At that meeting, we figured out what data collection did we need to gather for the study. And so we've gathered the data. We've had a team meeting, a study team meeting in September. And that's really, we started reviewing the data, presented what data we had, talked about next steps. And then really the next step was, let's schedule the public meeting. And that was the end of September, beginning of October. And we and the town thought it would be best to wait till after the November elections to have this meeting. So that's why there's been a slight delay in this process, but we're here tonight to have the public meeting. In terms of our next steps, we have quite a few of them, obviously tonight to solicit comments. And then really we want to take some alternatives and do the analysis. So figure out what alternatives we want to proceed forward with and complete the analysis, develop some conceptual plans, develop some conceptual costs, take those alternatives and compare them with our purpose and need statement. How well do they meet the purpose and need? And then we'll draft up some recommendations. We'll meet again with a study team, and we'll meet again with the public. We'll have the public process engagement, get feedback on the options considered and what our draft recommendations might be. So, and then based on study team comments, public comments, we'll go ahead and make final recommendations and conclude this with a final report is really what will come out of it. So the goal of this is to come up with a recommendation that can be implementable and funded with a goal of hopefully maybe the town and the DOT can work together to get this into maybe the DOT's work plan as a future project down the road. So right now it's not funded for construction. And my best guess, Marty's on the line, but my best guess is potentially 3 years away if we can come up with a recommendation that's supported and can be funded. So in terms of schedule for us to do the study, this schedule here is a little outdated now. It was developed back in August, but we were assuming a public meeting in September. That public meeting was really is beginning of December. So these dates that you see here probably are going to slide a month or two, but the goal would be to come back with recommendations in January. That might be February or March now. Have a public meeting in, again, February or March. We want to wrap up the report as early as we can, but it could be as early as February, probably as late as March or April would be our thoughts. So So with that said, that kind of concludes our presentation, and I'm going to give the floor back, I guess, to Michael, and maybe, I don't know if Randy can control the muting and unmuting. You people, I think this is the time where we would do the Q&A session, and I don't know if there's the ability to raise your hand or to kind of identify yourself as having a question, and Randy can unmute you maybe.
I think people can unmute themselves.
Okay. All right. I see Craig.
Yeah, we can go ahead and take questions now, definitely.
Yeah. Hi, I work with Benefit Saco Old Orchard Beach Transit. And my initial comment is that I would be very concerned about sending our buses up Goodwin. It's kind of narrow. It's a residential area. Buses, tend to be noisier than a car. And so that stands out to me immediately. And, lifetime resident from around here, so I've dodged many a bullet through that intersection. I was wondering about traffic counts coming out of Old Orchard Road and how that played into turning that into a stoplight. And second thing is that we all know that all the vehicles coming off 95 and off the spur is where we're getting most of the speed. And so initially I would support the roundabout. I think our buses would navigate that better. And I like having the traffic moving all the time as much as possible.
Okay. I think those are great comments. Goodwin Ave it's a great comment. Right now it's a local road. I think if it ever became a connector like we're talking, I think there would have to be some improvements there along that road. So, and then the traffic volumes on Old Orchard Road, Guy, we'll get to you in a second. I don't have that data. Randy, I don't know if we haven't done any analysis to say that warrants a signal, I guess, if that's your question. We haven't done it yet. You're right. It may not warrant a signal. It may be a three-way intersection unsignalized. We just kind of assumed, we're jumping to conclusions a bit to assume it would be signalized. So we haven't done the traffic analysis yet, but that would be our next step. And then speed on coming off the interstate, we agree 100%. That's our problem area, particularly shooting down Temple Ave. It's a straight shot. They don't have to navigate the intersection. They just drive straight through, and it's blinded by the tattoo, the business there. The building blocks the view, and people are sneaking out. It's just really dangerous. I would love to see if we could justify it from a volume perspective to get that down to one lane on the approach, but right now it's 2 lanes, and I'm guessing our analysis is going to tell us it needs to be 2 lanes. But we can look at trying to make some geometric improvements. You're right. If it's a roundabout, you're controlling speed with geometry. So I think those are great comments. Thank you. Guy, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, my name's Guy Fontaine. I'm a lifelong resident of the Old Salt Road.
Okay.
When they did the changing and added Old Salt Road onto Temple last year as a traffic calming, the theory was probably okay, but in the factuality, it's not working very well for the neighborhood.
Okay.
What happens is you have the people that are coming out of Old Salt Road tend to come out in the middle of that small turn that they made onto Temple, which requires those coming from I-95 or through the intersection to come to a full stop on Temple to be able to make that hard 90-degree right turn onto Old Salt Road. I have almost been rear-ended a couple of times now. Neighbor on this street has had their car destroyed. They were hit on that same thing, because you can't just come down and make that 90-degree right turn on Old Salt Road. If there's nobody there, you can. If there's a car trying to get out, there's just no room, and it doesn't work. It seems it would be a lot easier to reinstall or restore the entrance to Old Salt Road coming from the spur as it used to be, and make that a one-way, so that the exit from Old Salt Road still is out on Temple. But those coming down through the intersection wanting to get onto the Old Salt Road, and there's a lot, because we have quite a few homes here now and condos, would not have to stop, and they could, as you could before, come straight through and onto Old Salt Road. And by putting a small island there and making it to one way onto Old Salt Road, it would eliminate that problem. Because right now, Most of the time, you, like I say, you have to turn onto Old Salt Road. If there's a car there, you have to come to a full stop because it's a difficult 90-degree turn. And the cars coming down from the spur, like I say, are not anticipating you doing that. And they're just not prepared for it. And there's, so you end up hearing screeching brakes behind you and then a horn blowing and a little waving at you because they don't understand what you're doing. Is trying to get back on Old Salt Road. So that, at least, like I say, that's one way I thought of alleviating that would be to restore that, just the entrance, not the output, but the entrance onto Old Salt Road, or just give the whole thing another thought, maybe widening it. Because right now it's just not, it's not working very, very well. And so that is a dangerous pinch point for us. You know, maybe if the rotary was different so that you didn't have that high-speed traffic coming down, it wouldn't have the problem. But right now, coming to a full stop on Temple to make a hard 90 onto Old Salt Road is very difficult.
Okay, thank you, Guy. Those are great comments. My recollection being out in the field, that entrance is very tight, and so I agree. If we can take a look at just the geometry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if we can widen out that entrance for the people turning into it, and maybe even separate them with a small island, so it's more of a free flow for them to get in there from Temple Ave. But yeah, we've got your comments recorded, so we'll take a look at it.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I see Jess G.
Hi, I'm a neighbor of Guy's, but I'm on the corner of Temple and Spring. So I see a lot of overflow traffic from people not wanting to go out of Old Salt onto Temple and coming around here. But my main points were, I was wondering under the needs, if under mobility is the impact on the ability for people from Temple Ave and Old Orchard Road to get out to access the intersection in high volume times. Because there's like, not this past summer because of COVID, but in the previous 3 summers that I've lived here, I've bought my house 4 years ago. Like there's certain times of the day and certain times of the year, like I can't even access that intersection without waiting an hour. And then it's like waiting an hour to, you know, to get into the death intersection is what I call it. So I don't know if that's listed as part of mobility or if that is another need that needs to be listed. Something I would love to see happen now, my biggest, of all the frustrations, my biggest frustration is coming from Temple Ave into the intersection and people on Old Orchard Road not realizing you're supposed to take turns, that you both have stop signs. But it's hard because when you come from Old Orchard Road, you're so worried about the people coming off 195 and the people who might be taking a left or might be coming Old Orchard Road. There's so many things to pay attention to that you sometimes forget about the people on Temple Ave. But it's so bad. It's not just the people coming off 195 and people on Temple Ave failing to yield. It's people not taking turns, and there's no signage saying you have a stop sign. You're supposed to take turns with Temple Ave, or Temple Ave, you're supposed to take turns with Old Orchard Beach Road. So if that could be a sooner rather than later. And then I'm just so happy this meeting is happening. I'm just so happy. The last piece I had is I've seen a lot of this development in South Portland, on Main Street in South Portland, that people, Temple Ave, they just speed down it, whether they're coming from 195 or not. And there have been some improvements, kind of like what happened to this intersection, that I'm wondering if in the straight shot of Temple Ave in the larger scope of this project, that perhaps there are improvements that can be done that slow people just down in general on the straight dash down to Ocean Park.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Yeah, great comments, Jess. So one thing I'll mention is the signal is going to benefit those side roads. So right now, the way it works is you're given the benefit on the unsignalized, all the traffic coming off the interstate, they've got the right of way. So all the side roads have to yield to it. The second you put a signal in there, it's going to impact that through traffic coming off. So you're going to see a benefit on Temple and Old Orchard with a signal for sure. And we're going to see a detriment to the other streets. So that's why you may see multiple lane approaches on those other streets because the volumes are so big. This intersection is a disaster. If I can, just the way it operates, it's not great, and we want to fix it. So that's our goal. All right. Lori, I think, had her hand up prior to. So Lori.
Hi, Don. Thank you. And I echo everybody's comments. Thank you so much for doing all this hard work. And I think calling it an intersection is being generous. It's a nightmare. I live just down probably about a half a mile from that intersection on Temple Avenue. And yeah, I agree with Jess. It's kind of, you're taking your life into your own hands. I have a couple of questions in terms of some of the cost analysis, whether you've had an opportunity to do any of that relative to your option 1 and 2 that you had identified with regards to a roundabout or a 4-way signal. And I appreciate having a signal, whether it's a 4-way or a 3-way, is definitely going to have implications on all those surrounding streets. So my kind of, if I were going to have to kind of choose something right out of the gate, it would be something more in terms of roundabouts, which we have, as you're probably well aware, throughout the state of Maine, and they work really, really well. So I'm just kind of curious about some cost analysis. I know you identified that you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of a 3-year time frame, which it makes sense from my perspective, at least anyway. But the other question that I had, I know I'm throwing a lot at you all at once, but the other question I had was, when you've done this kind of analysis in terms of traffic study for this one particular area that we're looking at on our screen right now, I'm curious if you all took into account further up towards the spur where the new, relatively new Dunkin' Donuts is, and Smith Wheel, where it's really also an extraordinarily dangerous space for people to turn left and right off of Smith Wheel. And then at one point in time, probably about a year ago, I think, or so, there was conversation and opportunity that we had with the Maine Department of Transportation in the town for a potential new development site, which definitely would have implications on this. And the only other thing that I will add, for those of you that don't know, I am also the state rep for Old Orchard Beach, and have been paying attention to this issue for a really long time, and also want to avail myself if there's any way that I can be helpful in facilitating a solution to this nightmare.
Thank you, Lori. So I'll try to answer as many of those questions as I can. So out of the gate, we have not done any cost estimates on any of the options. So we don't know what they're going to cost and how option 1 to option 2 compare to each other. Intuitively, I would say the roundabout might be more expensive historically, but the 4-way signalized intersection is going to be a big intersection. So so that it won't be a cheap date. It will be expensive. So I can't say one over the other. We haven't done any assessment of costs, and literally the graphics I showed you is the level of development we've done, and we haven't run any traffic analysis yet. So in terms of the development approaching the intersection, Randy's here. We have collected some of that new development data from those projects, and we'll be incorporating that into our traffic analysis. So our goal is that we're trying to incorporate that the best we can. And, you know, yeah, so that's the update there. I think I answered most of your questions. Oh, timeline. Please don't quote me on the 3 years. And I'm speaking out of turn. I definitely would defer to Michael Foster or Marty Rooney. This isn't funded for construction. This is just the first step. But if we can do a good planning study and prove to them that this is the best option, meets the purpose and need, and can be implemented, that's really what the DOT and the town needs to take the next step of trying to get it funding secured, both state, federal, and local funding. And I just don't know the timeline on that. It just might, and I'm gonna probably put Marty on the spot. To me, it feels like you won't see any funding in less than 3 years on something like this, assuming the study gets done and is accepted in the next 6 months. Marty, would that be a correct statement?
Yeah, once we have a study, it would, again, there's different programs it could compete for. There's partnership programs that the town could be a financial partner and approach Maine DOT. There's also different safety and mobility programs, which would be much more of an empirical engineering evaluation. But again, the first step is to go through the study, gather all the information, receive public input, and then have discussions with municipal officials of where to go from there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And again, I know that our former state senator, Senator Shanette, and I had done a fair amount of work on this, and our newly elected state senator, Donna Bailey, I believe, is on this call. So she and I are in constant communication with Maine DOT as well. So again, we want to avail ourselves if there's any way that we can be helpful and shepherding this along, even in terms of trying to leverage our relationship with stakeholders at the state level.
Lori, you're doing the right thing.
Thank you very much for all of this hard work that you've done. We really appreciate it.
Yep. All right. I see a hand up with Dave and Debbie Walker.
All right,
had
to get us unmuted. Don, my question is this: Did we think about gating the traffic off of 195 by putting a traffic light and stopping them as they come into our area? That would allow everybody in the intersection to make their moves and get in and get out. Because right now, what happens is they just come in at an awful rate of speed. If you stop them with a traffic light, you gate them coming in, that could be a game changer for us.
Yep. David, that's a great question. We have not considered that. A couple things would need to happen. If you wanted to put a signal in right at the end of the interstate spur, you would need to do basically a traffic warrant analysis. It would have to warrant a signal. There's certain stipulations that need to be met to justify a signal. The next location where it could be possible is is it Sherwheel? There's a road to the left.
It's Smithwheel.
Smithwheel, thank you,
Yep.
Smithwheel. So they did some improvements there. They have a safer pedestrian crossing there with a refuge island. That would be the second location that I would see that, hey, that might trigger a signal, which could help meter and slow traffic down. But again, it would have to be a signal warrant analysis to justify that. So right now, neither one of those are part of this current study. As this study evolves, and we may want to take a look going back to those areas, but right now we're not planning on that, and that would be kind of a separate signal analysis to justify putting that in. One thing I would note to you as a word of caution is on the interstate system itself, there is a lot of concern about stop traffic. So any of these off ramps, not necessarily off that spur, but as you know, the interstate system is the highest speed roadways that we have in the state. And the last thing they want is stop traffic on it, because that results in very severe type of accidents. If you have a car stopped with stop traffic and a car hits it at 75 miles an hour, the results are not good. So usually with the interstate systems, and we'll use Topsom as an example, when you come off the interstate onto those ramps, those signals are usually designed such that if traffic ever backs up on the ramps up to the main line of the interstate, they'll trigger the signal to clear that traffic out. They don't ever really want traffic stopped on a high-speed throughway. And while 195 is not the full interstate, I think the speed might be less. It might be 55 miles an hour. Cars go very fast through there. So I get what you're saying. I do like the fact that they do the lane reduction, and that helps to slow some speed down, but we still have an issue on speed on that approach for sure.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'm gonna scan here. I don't see any hands up on this page. I'll scan to the next page. I don't see any hands raised at the moment.
I believe Dave has had his hand up for a while.
Go for it, Dave.
Yeah, good evening. I want to apologize if I repeat anything that has been said. My connection's been going in and out a little bit. I just want to say that if anybody has traveled to Europe, is particularly Spain, the roundabouts there that they utilize are incredible. I was driving for hours, never having to stop at a traffic light. So I wanted to throw my hat in the ring for the roundabout solution. I also feel that would require the least amount of work on the roads going up to the roundabout, in the intersection itself. Okay, and as far as the bike people, I'm a biker myself. Okay, And I was curious if there would be enough room on Saco Ave to maybe create a bike lane, although, maybe a little bit unsafe on that road, to be completely honest. And also the pedestrian islands like they have at Smithfield where the Dunkin' Donuts is. I mean, maybe they could create a couple of them at the end of Temple and maybe crossing Old Salt. I think that would maybe solve some of the issues there with pedestrians and bicycles. As far as the traffic light, I'm against that for the reason being that most of the traffic coming into Old Orchard is on a Saturday morning, going in and coming out. I mean, you have residents like myself that would go maybe to Hannaford's to shop on a Saturday morning, and transients that maybe are coming in, or visitors on a Saturday. And I think if you put a traffic light there, you're going to back up into the spur, like you were saying, possibly, and create more of a problem, maybe with a traffic jam, so to speak. And I've talked to people in town about this with the roundabout, and they said, well, that's no good because people don't know how to use roundabouts. Well, a lot of people that come into Old Orchard Beach are repeat visitors on the weekends, and I think that they wouldn't take a long time for them to figure out how to use them. And if they're used correctly, they work. And that's kind of what my input. That's what I want to say about all this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And you're absolutely right. With roundabouts, the biggest thing, well, it's education, but it's wayfinding, it's signage and striping are critical to the operation of a roundabout. So as long as the people entering the roundabout clearly understand what lane they need to be in, it's smooth sailing. I agree with you, Dave. 20 years ago, I was doing this same work, and roundabouts were new to Maine, and there was a lot of hesitation about, is this the right thing to do? And Maine's been very progressive, and they've done a great job of the roundabouts, and they've learned over the years how to improve on the design of the roundabouts, and they really have them kind of mastered now. So I have all the confidence in the world that if it ends up being a roundabout that's recommended, it can be done successfully here at Old Orchard, and I think it will function very well. So on the bicycle side of the fence, that's why we've got Jim Tassi on our team. Jim is going to be looking at the connectivity of not just at the intersection, but on the approaches to this intersection. That's the value added that Jim's going to bring to our group. So it will not go unseen, or we will not forget about it for sure. I agree also with you, Dave, regarding a roundabout does allow the ability to try to keep, for the most part, the approach, the alignment of the side roads relatively the same, if you know what I mean, that you can kind of keep all of the locations of these roads in relatively the same location, and they all tie into a roundabout. So it may result in less geometric improvements of the side streets. But we got to put it on paper and design it and model it and analyze it to see what it tells us. So, all right, I see
Thank
Larry
you.
Mead.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Larry, I see your hand is raised, so you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. So there was some questions about the next sort of significant steps once this study is done and where we go from there. And Old Orchard Beach is a member of PACS, the Portland Area Comprehensive Transportation System. And so as such, in terms of getting a significant project like this done, we have to go through the PACS process. It's not just an MDOT decision, really. And I think the next step after this study is done is for the town to request funding through what's called a PDR, a preliminary design report. In order for us to move to the next step of getting on the list or on the queue for significant PACS funding, we have to, the way the process works now is you first have to get your PDR done. So just so people know that, I think what I would be looking to is, as soon as this is done, is for the town to start that process, and we would need to do some funding on our end. It's not automatic just by applying because it's competitive. And so I wouldn't be able to say that we would get that funding the first time out. It might take 2 years instead of 1 year, but But that's where we have to go next.
Okay, thank you, Larry. And a big part of that PDR, so PDR stands for Preliminary Design Report. It's basically developing 50% complete construction plans and filling out a PDR form, but also doing a detailed cost estimate. So we're going to do a planning level cost estimate as part of this study. That will be more engineering detailed level where you have within probably 10 to 20% accuracy what you think the construction costs will be. It will be based on full survey, so you go out and collect survey. Right now, you know, all of our design layouts will be on aerial. We're not collecting ground survey for this type of work. So, so what Larry's referring to is kind of the next level of more precise design analysis. And it would only be on that recommended alternative that this study comes out with. All right, Lori, I see your hand is raised.
Just a question to what Larry had referred to in terms of the PDR and timing, understanding that this is really in its preliminary stages in terms of what we're exactly going to do and how that may kind of pan out and what it will look like. Given that that's going to take some time, and then the PDR has to get facilitated, is there any kind of intelligence around whether or not we can kind of get ourselves in the queue in a more expedient manner in terms of getting that PDR done or started or facilitated? So that's just kind of one question. And then the second point for me is just an observation, and I could be wrong because I now, thank you, I see the full Hollywood Squares screen here with the grid.
Sorry.
No, this is great. You can, it's just helpful. My life has been Zoom for the past 8 months, but I'm just kind of curious. I don't see any of the business folks that will potentially be impacted that are around this area on this call. So I'm just curious if there's a more deliberate opportunity to get feedback and input from those folks as well.
Larry, do you want to provide the response? Or you want me to take a stab at it?
I take it. I'll say what I think, and then if you have more detail or better information, certainly go ahead and add it. So Lori, I think what I would say is that it would be recognized in the PACS community that this is a really significant problematic area. So it would have a high priority from that perspective. It also, that being said, however, as you know, there's very limited funds and there is a lot of competition in the PACS region. So it's not a sure thing that you get there the first time. And then the last thing I would just say, in terms of having been involved in PACS for quite a while, even before I came to Old Orchard, the fact that it still hasn't disappeared that Old Orchard rejected the project in 2009 and sort of was given the money and then backed out. And so there's this sort of sense in PACS of, well, Old Orchard, you know, you really got to wait your turn until you get up here. So we'll be fighting that as well. But I think if we kind of all come in, like when it gets to PACS, if you go there, Lori, and participate, and I think that has an effect as well. So I think if we work at it, we can try to make an impact with the PACS community to make us a priority.
Larry, is there someone who's moved to Old Orchard after 2009 that's just like, I didn't know that, and that just almost made me fall off my chair? Do you have like a couple of quick sentences you can say as to why we rejected it for history?
I think it was just a product of a council that had approved the project in terms of the planning stages, was essentially mostly gone, and then the next council that came in hadn't been involved in the beginning of the project, and there was a lot of concern about a couple of properties were going to have to be taken, portions of them by eminent domain at that corner. There was some political feedback about that, and then that was going to cost the town some significant bucks, and that's exactly when the Great Recession hit. And so there was some backing away because of that as well.
Okay, what else do we have? Anybody else for questions? I don't see any hands raised. If you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Just sort of random to roundabouts. I'm a big fan, but seeing as this, you know, the other roundabouts mostly that I've been through, because there's lots more around now, is that almost everyone coming into the intersection is kind of coming from an equally trafficked area, whereas this roundabout would have two distinct ones that are much more trafficked than the others. So like, would Temple and Old Orchard Road still have, like, does it slow people down enough so they still get a chance to get into the intersection in a roundabout when it's high trafficked in the other directions?
Randy, you want to answer that, or you want me to take a stab at it?
Go ahead.
All right, so my answer is yes, it will still work. The philosophy early on was, in order for a roundabout to work, you needed to have equal volumes on all legs. That was the kind of the rule of thumb. If you didn't have that, don't do a roundabout. And I just don't adhere to that philosophy. I think it does work. The geometry, if you drive into any roundabout, you'll notice it's not a straight shot for you to get in. There's curvature. Europe is very well known for designing roads to control speed by curvature. So they'll design their road such that you can't drive fast on it. And the US government, they were against it. They were like, no, we're not going to use geometry to control speed. This is the one case where they have accepted using geometry to control speed at roundabouts. Their goal is they want the speed through the roundabout to be around 15 miles an hour for traffic. And so on every approach, there is geometric changes that are happening, which is forcing vehicles to slow down before they get into it. Yes, there are going to be some legs that have high volumes, but there should be gaps created in those legs where you can kind of sneak out. The idea is that somebody had mentioned Temple and Old Orchard Road. You're supposed to alternate, right? And they're not doing it. They're not following the unwritten rules. With the roundabout, that's typically what happens. It's slow enough that you can end up kind of merging in with that traffic, ideally. There'll be times where, yeah, there'll be a steady flow coming from one direction. You got to kind of wait your turn, but you should see gaps. Randy, how'd I do?
You did awesome. Wouldn't change a thing.
Okay. All right. So hopefully that answers your question, Jess. All right, folks, any other questions? All right. Larry, not Larry, but
Hi, this is Mike.
Mike,
I just want to
I'll hand it
mention,
back to you.
yeah, I just want to say if anyone comes up with questions or ideas or comments after this, that you shared my email at the beginning. Maybe we can share that again at the end, and that way people have it here, and then anyone watching this after the fact will also have that to add any comments. Yep. And I just appreciate everyone's feedback and attending tonight, and I think we got some good information, and this will definitely help in moving forward.
Yeah. So Michael, correct me. So we're recording this. So Randy, don't forget to stop recording, by the way. We're recording this. It will be posted on the town's website, Michael, correct?
Yes, that's the plan.
Yep. So everybody should have access to it. And I think they'll have the ability to write in their comments if they want. So neighbors that are not here, business owners that aren't here that you may know of, please encourage them to go there. And like I said, Michael's email address will be made. It's in that recording, but we'll provide it now as well. They can email Michael directly. I think we're hoping the next 2 to 4 weeks to get comments. Michael, does that sound reasonable for you?
Yes.
Okay. And then your email address is mfoster at
OOB and then Maine spelled out MAINE.com.
Okay. So
excellent.
Hey, Jared.
Yeah. Lori, a couple of questions ago, had just mentioned that she didn't see the business people who were immediately adjacent to the project in the area. And she had just made a question about reach out to people in the surrounding area. This is the first of a few public meetings, so there will be more in touch. I just wanted to make sure you guys, we had kind of addressed that.
Okay.
This wasn't the only one. So
okay.
We will be in touch with the surrounding businesses and stuff.
And as part of this process, they should have been notified, I would assume, in writing with a letter that this public meeting was happening if they were an abutter to this project. Is that correct, Michael?
I believe that the notice didn't go out to abutters. It was just posted publicly.
Okay.
I don't think there was an abutter notice that went out for this meeting, just the public posting.
Okay. So we'll work with the town a bit on that. I do think outreach to the business owners would be good, Lori. So let us, prior to our second meeting, let's make sure we make connections with them. And if we need to do an independent Zoom call with them to explain what we're looking at for options, I think their input's going to be invaluable through this process. So thank you.
And then so the next steps, I mean, I know that your slide had next steps identified, but
Yeah.
I just heard you say second meeting done. So can you just help give us a kind of a small, maybe frame of reference for what that might look like in terms of next steps, and then how we might, at least everybody here, and then moving forward, other folks be prepared to be participatory?
Yeah, so our thought is we need to go back, and now we're going to actually start doing our job. We're going to start analyzing some alternatives. We didn't hear today, anything significantly different than what we've outlined so far. So we're probably going to run traffic analysis and model all those. We're going to develop some concepts. We'll actually, figure out how we're going to deal with bicycle and pedestrians through each of the options. We'll put that on paper. We'll develop some cost estimates. We'll compare it with our purpose and need. And then it kind of form an outline. It'll funnel down as to, okay, which options are rising to the top? Which ones do we think bring the best bang for our buck? Which one best meets the purpose and need? And then that's when we won't have a final recommendation, but that data is when we now want to go back out and reach back out to the study team, the town officials, and then we reach out to the public as well. So that's really our next step in the process. So you guys will have a chance to kind of see what is the data kind of suggesting to us? What does it look like? How much might it cost? We get feedback from the public, and then based on the feedback from the study team and the public, we make revisions as needed, and we finalize our recommendations and put a report together is really the next step. So that's the process. Timeline, I would say 4 months is probably, I'll look to Michael and Larry, but I don't think it's going to get done in January or February. It's going to take a bit more time than that from our original schedule, just because it took a while to get to this point. So it feels like it's March, April is when we will be having some data together. It might be February where we have an idea what we're doing. So thank you, Lord. Michael, you good? Larry, you good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you everyone for attending. You have Michael's contact, and Michael has my contact. So if you guys need to get a hold of us, just work through Michael. We're happy to help out where we can.
Thank you all very much. This was really helpful.
Thank you. You guys have a good night.